so many different honors he has lost as a result of first the accusations, then being convicted, and now, of course, him heading to prison. As I mentioned, Television Critics Association, they renounced their award, Lifetime Achievement Award given to him. But also, the Hollywood Walk of Fame has made clear his star will not be removed. They have never removed the star of anybody who has gotten one, no matter what has happened to them later on. So I want to go back to Crystal High and Lon Walls and talk about that because, so here's, I get folks being a part of this news cycle. And I understand people responding. But whether you disagree or agree with him being convicted or going to prison, you can't erase. I mean, you can't act as if Bill Cosby is not an iconic figure in the history of television, in the history of Hollywood.
So, we tend not to deal really well with nuance, right? And we like to look at people from this specific, let me put you in a box view. If you are not Mr. Jello Pudding Cosby man, then you can't possibly be any other thing, right? So I think this is one of those lessons, right? One of those moments where people have to step back and say, yes, he has been accused and convicted of some tragic things, right? But at the same time, he has done tremendous good in the community as well. If you go back, I think the number of people he has sent to college, the amount of contributions he's made to HBCUs. You made a point earlier about how people looked at his books as leadership, right? And we talked about this cultural moment about growing up with the Cosby Show and what that meant culturally for so many people. That doesn't go away, but this is one of those times where we have to be able to separate the man as the person and the man from what he's done in a professional and a philanthropic context.
I mean, look, Lon, Phil Spector sitting in prison right now for killing a woman. That doesn't negate that Phil Spector is considered one of the top record producers in music history and being a genius when it comes to music. It doesn't.
Right. Well, but the thing is here is that, first of all, we go back to the PR. You have to embrace the fact he was America's dad. And sometimes our dads and grandfathers have issues. Now, we negated and we neglected that, and his legal team, his PR team, decided they're going to be aggressive. You're going to try to compare him to Emmett Till. Let's give me a break. So I think they really made a mistake in trying not to embrace his dad image. And for that, dads are sick. How many cases are we talking about? How many folks have come forward? At some point in time, you decide, let's look at this as a sickness. And you look at the case, you say, this guy is sick. What he's doing is sick. So let's go the approach of he's a sick man. Let's deal with that, as opposed to trying to fight each and every person who comes forward. That's a mistake.
In fact, today, when Andrew White came out of the courtroom, he was reading a statement. I wasn't sure if that was because Ebony, who was one of the other publicists, was reading the Camille Cosby statement. So I'm not sure if he was also reading another part of it. But at one point he was reading, and he invoked racism and sexism, with Bill Cosby being targeted.
Yeah, that may be true. It doesn't make what he did correct. And again, I say that this is a sick man. I mean, when it gets down to it, he's a sick man. We should have dealt with it that way.
But here's the deal: as somebody who's done PR for a number of years, would you have even been that aggressive coming out, knowing full well you're also trying to file an appeal?
Exactly. That's a mistake. When you have a potential jury pool out there, you don't want to be aggressive because you don't know who you're going to affect.
Well, first of all, he's already been convicted.
Yeah.
So,
right.
but so the appeal is really would be dealing with the judges, but you're
Right.
still operating in the court of public opinion.
Exactly. Court of public opinion. Exactly. And I think at some point in time, you got to pull back and say, okay, enough of this. This is not working for us. We need to retrench and figure out a better way to do this because of the fact this man's image is going to go up in flames no matter what he's done. What's happened? I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, what is his legacy going to be?
So I remember when the Smithsonian Museum of African American History, when it opened, there were a lot of people who said that they needed to put something in there with regards to his misdeeds, and they did, and that was very controversial. Mm-hmm. A lot of people felt that they shouldn't have. Others said they should have. To Vincent Thompson's point, a third of the women who's accused him, they're African American. So this is not an issue of a black man being accused by white women. There are some of these women also black. So I'm very curious to hear from both of you. Again, how do we then have a discussion about a Bill Cosby and his place in history. And when you think back to, I mean, I'll give you a perfect example, the black stuntman. The reality is, when you were in Hollywood and you were black and they needed a stunt person, they went and got somebody white and they put shoe polish on their face. It was Bill Cosby who said, no, you are going to get me a black stunt person. And when the documentary came out about the history of the black stunt men and stunt women, they removed Bill Cosby from the documentary, even though he was the reason for their organization even being founded because of the position that he took. When I think about Melvin Van Peebles, the Sweetback's Badass movie, that movie, Bill Cosby was one of the funders. And so how do we have a discussion about all of that Bill Cosby has done and still have a discussion about him being convicted of sexual assault?
Well, so I think on one hand, it goes back to this notion of nuance, right? And like being able to step back and have more complete and complex conversations about the various facets and factors that make up a person. It's hard to do that in a social media context when you're limited to a few, Twitter characters, or like you have a short amount of content you can put on
how about
Facebook
this here? So how about this here? So
it's
let's
real
imagine.
conversation.
How about this one here? So let's imagine there's a discussion in LA, NAACP, any place, and we're talking about images. And we're talking about the importance of images and what they mean. For all of these years, we've always talked about what the Cosby Show meant to black folks, to have that image of a lawyer and a doctor and being presented to black America. So I would think that if that discussion is still being held, folks are going to be very leery about even bringing up the Cosby Show out of fear of ticking somebody else.
See, that's the problem. We don't need to be afraid. I mean, we need to embrace what he's done positively. I mean, to step back and all of a sudden he's kicked off of everything, I think that's a little bit of an overreaction. I think basically he's done a lot of good things. Let's take that into consideration. It's like we judge any other person. Our dad, he's got good stuff, he's got bad stuff. We need to kind of grow up and realize we've got to deal with the bad as well as the good. That's maybe that might be sort of a naive approach, but that's what we need to do. We can't erase this guy from what he's done. That's impossible.
I think the other angle that would be interesting is to see how you separate conversation around what has historically been Bill Cosby's legacy, and then making sure he doesn't continue to profit financially on a going forward basis, right? Because a lot of times when you think about, we're going to revoke this award, we're going to revoke your syndication, we're going to, take away all of the things that you supposedly stood for, right? That has a direct bearing on his financial well-being.
But not just him.
Not just
I
him.
mean, the brother Jeffrey Holder.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, he said one of the reasons he took that job at Trader Joe's was because the residuals from the Cosby Show greatly dried up, because when the show was pulled from a bunch of different networks, including black networks.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I mean, it goes back again. I'm going to keep coming to complexity and nuance, and we can't try and approach issues like this in a social media only framework where we're just going to get, here are my 140, 280 characters of pure outrage and emotion. If you're really trying to be honest about the role he's played in black culture and American culture, you have to step back and talk broadly about it.
And last point, we also have to confront the reality and challenge men and women on the reality that Bill Cosby has been convicted, because sexual harassment, sexual assault is real. Like I said, a third of these women were black, so it's not as if folks can say, "Well, no, that simply wasn't the case." We have to still deal with the issue of sex and power and money, even when it involves a Bill Cosby, and have those real discussions, and then not just say, "Well, there are double standards," and that this happened to white folks, but Bill Cosby's going to jail, but Bill O'Reilly is still out. Roger Ailes, of course, was never prosecuted. Trump and Kavanaugh, Harvey Weinstein, on and on and on, still dealing with that impacts black women as well.
Exactly.
Absolutely. No, I mean, you couldn't be more right about that analysis. And I think when we talk about these things in totality, we have a tendency to want to cancel people when we're upset with their conduct. And that, in some ways, right, it'll prove your point. But if you're ultimately trying to get to a point of progress, you can't necessarily cancel everybody. Like, we all wanted to cancel Kanye when he was talking out the mouth about, slavery being a choice.
And if I got
and I'm not buying his stuff, so it's like those are decisions, but there are still conversations that can be had about impact and cultural relevance over time. And so similar, I think, in the Cosby situation, we don't have to continue to patronize anything of his,
Right.
but you can have that broader
You
conversation.
got to respect what he's done. You
And
still have
I
to do
never
that.
remind people that Mike Tyson went to jail for rape. Got out. People watched him in The Hangover and other movies, and then went to see his one-man play that was also on HBO, and people still revere
Right.
Mike Tyson, who went to prison
Right.
Y'all
for
still out
rape.
here buying R. Kelly records.
Right. But there's sometimes you got to
Right.
have.
I mean,
you have to have
Like-
contrition. You have to have contrition.
Even
at
though
some
R.
point in
Kelly
time.
was not convicted,
He was not.
Right.
okay, but you still have the massive allegations against him. But again, shows you the types of discussions that are being had.
Right.
Crystal Long, we certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much again.